Welcome everyone to the Point of Care Technology Research Network Technical Assistance webinar. Today we will go through the RFA 22203 and hope to answer any questions you may have about the upcoming, the now active funding opportunity announcement. So my name is Tiffany Bailey Lash, and I serve as a Senior Program Director at the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. I manage the point of care technologies and digital health portfolios. So today we'll discuss a network, which is called the Point of Care Technology Research Network. The goal of the Point of Care Technology Research Network, which we call POCTRN, is to develop technologies with clinical applications using a network model that enhances complementary strengths and builds multidisciplinary partnerships. Things that we like to see within POCTRN is that they conduct in-house clinical testing of prototype point of care devices, collaborates with physical, biochemical, and computational scientists and engineers on exploratory technology development projects, conduct needs assessments in the areas anticipated to advance the field of point of care technologies, and disseminates the information to the technology development community. We also would love for the POCTRN network to provide training to technology developers on these clinical issues related to the development of point of care technologies. As you see, we have the overarching goal listed here. And in this particular funding opportunity announcement, I'm happy to share my colleagues who are interested in supporting the POCTRN network, and those include the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, the National Institute of Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the National Cancer Institute, as well as Nibib with the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. So I've shared a little bit about POCTRN, but I did want to present some information about what we funded in the past. This is just an indication of, to show that it kind of runs the spectrum of what the clinical need may be. We funded areas in neurotechnologies, disaster readiness, global health, sexual transmitted diseases, cancer care, primary care, microsystems, HIV/AIDS, and also heart, lung, blood, and sleep diseases. What we believe in is collaboration, clinical testing of prototypes, the needs assessments, and training in all of these different areas. What we're excited about is each time we have a funding opportunity, particularly for POCTRN, it opens the doors for similar areas or new areas. What dictates those new areas are, the interest in the different institutes, which we'll go into a little bit later. So now that we've talked about POCTRN as a whole, let's talk a bit about the Technology Research and Development Center. That is what this particular funding opportunity is soliciting. So the TRDCs, what we call them, will be a part of POCTRN. Each TRDC will accelerate the development, validation, deployment of point of care, home-based, and other innovative testing technologies in a specific area of health research. I can't stress that enough. It will be a specific area of health research. Each one of the developments TRDCs will encompass. The POCTRN TRDCs will merge scientific and technological capabilities and expertise with clinical need and market demand to address unmet testing, monitoring, and treatment demands. We would view this the particular centers as leaders and experts in the field for whatever that clinical need is. that will be that specific area of health research. We are opening this initiative to all applicants, including the existing grantees, as well as new applicants. So I'm going to start out with looking at the different statements of interest from the ICs that are participating in this initiative. And they're listed here, but we're going to go through each one of them. I also have my colleagues on the line who will be the program officers who represent these different ICs to share a little bit about what they're interested in. So you'll get, some information about, the funders and where their interests lie. So to start off, I will kick things off with NIBIB. NIBIB is disease agnostic. But we do pride ourselves on saying that we're responsible for engineering the future. So what we're interested in, and our mission involves transforming through engineering the understanding of disease and its prevention, detection, diagnosis, and treatment. So we support tools and technologies that improve human health. So our areas of interest with the POCTRN initiative, again, are structured around emerging technologies and clinical needs. Let's see here. The point of care technologies that Nhlbi will support will enable patient-centered healthcare through the development and application of point of care and home-based technologies. I've listed here, these are just examples, but we certainly are interested in other areas and technology modalities. But we do have an interest in supporting a center or centers that may focus on primary care, emergency preparedness, emerging infectious diseases, low resource settings, as well as ambulatory care. So these are areas that NIBIB is interested in, but it's not limited to. This is an open initiative. So, but it's important for the applicants to have a specific interest in which their center will focus on. Another thing before I move on to the other institutes, you may see some things that look, applicable to the center you're proposing that may be at NIBIB. It may be at another, something of interest to another institute. So we encourage you to talk to any of the institutes that seem like they your interests fall within the line of that particular institute. And I'll share contacts afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our next institute. That is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And my colleague, Dr. John Glock, will be presenting NIAID's interest.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Glock. I'm a program officer here at NIAID. And for the last 60 years, NIAID has facilitated research that led to new therapies, vaccines, diagnostics, and other technologies for a myriad of infectious diseases, as well as advancing understanding and diagnosis and treatments for many of the world's intractable widespread diseases. We are also concentrating on basic and applied research to better understand and treat and ultimately prevent infectious immunologic and allergic diseases as well. NIAID's particular request in this PAR, or this initiative, is to concentrate on sexually transmitted infections, as well as other areas within its research mission, concentrating on pandemic preparedness, diagnostics for those, diagnostics for biothreat weapons, basically anything that does fall within our research mission. Interested in facilitating. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. We'll move on to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, And I will have my colleague, Dan Kostov, share the interests of NIDA.
Yes, hi everybody. NIDA is devoted to the research and hopefully translation to practice of this research in the area of drug abuse. We are trying to find additional ways, as in addition to what already exists out there, to help our patients. One has to remember that the population that is of interest for NIDA are people that not always have a high socioeconomic status. In fact, there may be a lot of disparities between the overall population and this particular population. So what we are interested in with this particular center that we are seeking to establish is to help bring the care closer to the patient, hopefully even at the point of need. So another center will develop technologies for the full substance use disorder continuum that will both help with diagnosis, that will help with acute treatment, that will help with chronic treatment, and hopefully even help with long-term support of people who decided to step off this path. Some examples that could be of interest is quantification of any drug of abuse in a variety of matrices. It's known that current devices most of the time are not point of care and require either expensive techniques or require some minimal preparation, but in this case are not very accurate. We are also looking to help people who do toxicology testing, especially people who might be in the offices of medical examiners or coroners. Of course, costs for this population is a big issue, both the cost of the insurance, but many times they are not insured. Therefore, any decrease of the cost of these devices is welcome. That's why we are looking for anything that can lower the cost at the point of care. And eventually what we are trying to see also is technologies that help facilitate complex samples at the point of care. These are just the examples that are mostly targeting the detection, but also if any other technology that can help with treatment, say, of the patient, it will be also of interest of such center. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dan. We'll move on to Nhlbi, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And my colleague, Joy Chen, will be presenting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joy Chen. I'm a program officer at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. So the Nhlbi supports development of technologies to detect, prevent, or treat heart, lung, blood, and sleep diseases and disorders, as well as all aspects of the management and safety of blood resources. We're interested in sponsoring a center to facilitate clinical validation and adoption studies for technologies that can be deployed in low resource settings. And the Nhlbi Center will not support early stage development of technology such as proof of concept, feasibility study, or prototype development, but rather projects entering or supported by the NHLBI Center would at least have a functional prototype and be ready for clinical validation. The NHLBI Center is also anticipated to have the capacity to cover the 4 programmatic or disease areas, heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders. And the applicant is encouraged to have co-investigators or collaborators with expertise in these areas. And at the right side showing are some examples of point of care technologies that could potentially be supported by the center. And these are not, this is not an exhaustive list, and just showing potential technologies, and we open to any or all possibilities. So the examples are point of care technologies that can detect acute condition or deterioration of chronic disease. And then technologies that will enable continuous monitoring and management of chronic disease at home, such as heart failure or chronic obstructive lung disease, asthma, and sickle cell disease. Integrated devices that can monitor multiple parameters, such as heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature, asthma status, blood pressure, and sleep quality. And minimally or non-invasively biomarker detection technologies for early detection of heart, blood, lung, and sleep disorders. And then various mobile applications and point of care technologies for really empowering patient self-care and self-management, communication with healthcare providers to allow them to adhere to the treatment, to adjust treatment, as well as to help clinicians to monitor patients' conditions in response to treatments and enable clinical decisions. So with that, Tiffany, I'll turn back to you. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, my colleague Erin Itriaga is also on the on this webinar, and both of us need to leave at 3. So we apologize if you have questions later on when we are not on. Please feel free to reach out to us by email. We're happy to chat.
All right, thank you so much, Julie. We're going to move on to the Fogerty International Center. My colleague Laura Povlich will be sharing the interests of Fogerty.
Thank you, Tiffany, and good afternoon, everyone. So the mission of the Fogerty International Center is to support and facilitate global health research conducted by U.S. and international investigators, as well as build partnerships between research institutions in the U.S. and internationally, and to train the next generation of scientists to address global health needs. So along these lines, the Fogerty International Center for this particular funding opportunity is interested in co-funding a center that focuses on the development, validation, and adoption of technologies that address global health problems. While we don't list out specific health areas or specific technologies, since we do cover global health broadly, we are interested in technologies that are specifically suited for low resource settings and applicable to low and middle income countries. In addition, we're interested in health areas that really are of concern to low and middle income countries and relevant to these places. And finally, we do prioritize collaborations with and training of scientists and researchers in low and middle income countries. So thank you, and I'll hand it back to Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Laura. So now we'll move on to the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, NCCIH. And my colleague, Imran Hagluslu, will be joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a program officer at NCCIH. The NCCIH supports the development and validation of technologies that can facilitate the integration of complementary and integrative health approaches into the points of care for diseases and conditions to enhance diagnosis, prevention, or treatment of diseases and associated symptoms or promotion of well-being. So complementary health approaches include a broad range of practices and interventions that are not typically part of conventional medical care and be classified by their primary therapeutic input, including nutritional, for example, special diets, dietary supplements, herbs, probiotics, psychological, for example, meditation, hypnosis, music-based intervention, physical, such as acupuncture, massage, chiropractic manipulation. Also, a combination of physical and psychological interventions, such as yoga, tai chi, dance therapies, inputs. And also integrative health emphasizes multimodal interventions that aim to improve health in multiple interconnected domains, social, psychological, and physical, including multiple organs and systems. Nccih is particularly interested in the development and validation of technologies that aim to integrate complementary approaches into points of care with conventional medical approaches to promote whole person health. Health conditions of interest to Nccih include, but not limited to, acute or chronic pain, sleep and sleep disturbances, fatigue, resilience, other symptomatic conditions such as those associated with menopause, management of mental health conditions commonly managed in primary care, such as mild to moderate depression or anxiety, behavioral changes to promote healthy behaviors, such as healthy eating and physical exercise. For this FOA, Nccih will not support clinical trials as a project or specific aims to test efficacy or effectiveness of a given intervention. And also examples of types of technologies include, but are not limited to, mobile devices or applications that can monitor the dose, intensity, duration, frequency of complementary approaches employed by the patients at POC, and technologies that can objectively measure pain or functional limitations due to pain, and technologies that can monitor or enhance physiological responses to complementary approaches at POC for the treatment of pain, fatigue, sleep disorder, mild to moderate depression, anxiety, or other symptomatic conditions. Technologies that can objectively assess or monitor stress, pain, sleep dysfunction, depression, or anxiety, which would be treated or managed by complementary approaches at home or in primary care facilities. And development and testing of mobile health technology or non-mobile technology and methods to monitor or quantify pain, physical and emotional well-being, breathing, sleep, or whole person health. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Imran, for sharing Nccih's interest. We also have the National Cancer Institute, and my colleague Miguel Osandin will be joining to share about Nccih's interest.
Hi, this is Miguel Osandon. Could you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, the focus of the Nccih is to support the transition of scientific discoveries and engineering advances into tools. So we are specifically interested in all the areas. The Nccih interest is very broad, but we are more specifically interested in the translation of these technologies, right? So we are accepting projects that they are going to go more early in the development, but also we want projects that they can be later in the development, so in the translational area. So we are interested in technologies that can be used for cancer early detection, diagnosis, disease monitoring, monitoring of treatment. What we envision is to incentivize these technologies and incentivize investigators to develop these technologies and address the challenges that those technologies have, especially in the area of disparities, right? We believe that technology can make a difference in the population that we are going to try to serve with these technologies, health disparities. So also we are for this reason, interested in low resource setting. So as I see, the NCI have a broad interest in this. So examples of these technologies could be any technology that work with non-invasive or minimally invasive samples, right? So that's a good idea. In vitro and in vivo imaging. We are also looking for portable platforms, right, for cancer detection, diagnosis, treatment monitoring. Also a smartphone-based platform, right, beyond the cell phone app, of course, right? So we want a little bit more than just to write an app in the cell phone. Technology that are able to process complex samples. So this is kind of the interest of the NCI in this area.
Right.
I'm going to leave at 3 o'clock, but my colleague Nhlbi, also from the NCI, will be here after that, so we can answer questions.
All right, thank you so much, Miguel. So now that you've heard the different interests for the different ICs, we'll go into some information about the actual awards, about award information. I do have here to assist with answering questions. You may have questions about the grantsmanship aspect of the funding opportunity announcement, or about the review. I have my colleagues here to be able to answer questions to support that. So I'm going to move on to just some highlighted information about the award, the section 2 on award information. So this funding instrument for the initiative is a cooperative agreement. The cooperative agreement means that, both the grantee and the NIH work hand in hand to achieve the goals and the milestones of the proposed work. We're here to support. So then we are also, again, we're allowing new and renewal applications. We're welcoming new ones and also the previous awardees. Funds available. So the number of awards we say is contingent upon the NIH appropriation and submission of sufficient number of meritorious applications. For the award budget, we strongly recommend that applications not request a budget more than 1.2 million in direct costs, but you are allowed to, put what's needed to achieve the goals of your particular your application or your proposed center. Facilities and administrative costs requested by consortium participants are not included in the direct cost limitation. Each project award period, it can be up to 5 years, and that's pretty common for the applicants to have it for 5 years. I also have some other important information just to bring to your attention from the funding opportunity announcement about foreign institutions. So foreign institutions, non-domestic entities are not eligible to apply. Non-domestic, non-US components of US organizations are not eligible to apply, but foreign components are allowed. So they're not necessarily eligible to apply for the application, but that doesn't mean that being an integral part as a foreign component, and you can look up the information under the defined in the NIH grants policy statement, are allowed. So we also ask that everyone provide a letter of intent. We ask that you submit a letter of intent to give us an idea, that of what you're proposing, a descriptive title or the proposed activity, your contact information. Maybe it doesn't have to be exhaustive. You can include it if you want, the key personnel, as well as participating institutions. This helps us with the review process, and it also gives us the opportunity to make sure you're in contact with the appropriate program officers in your area. So we do request a letter of intent 6 weeks prior to the due date. So one thing I wanted to point out is that this particular initiative or funding opportunity announcement is a multi-component application. We have the different components listed here: overall, administrative core, technology core, the clinical core, and the dissemination core. All of these cores and the overall component is required. So you want to make sure that you fill out, that your application includes information in all of these different components. So the key dates that we have here, the earliest application date will be August the 26th. We also have a letter of intent due, which I mentioned 6 weeks prior to the application due date. We also, with this letter, is a request for over $500K if you're requesting funds over $500,000. We do request that you submit a request for that, and that can go along with the letter of intent at the 6 week prior to the application due date. All applications are due on September 27th. Please keep an eye out on that date. Any information, if there's a change in the date, will be listed on the website. Applications that have a component that deals with AIDS has the application due date of January 7th, 2023. If there are any other details, you can find everything in the announcement. However, we do make it a point to request that you contact your points of contact. You can see here all those who spoke today or who are listed as the program officers or the scientific research contacts for this initiative. I highly recommend that you reach out to any of the scientific research contacts that are of interest, you think, or would be of interest to what your specific topic is. We also have listed the financial grants management contacts. You may have some concerns or some questions about how the budget looks or how to, enter in something with regards to the budget or any type of grants management questions you have. Those are listed to the right as well. We also have the peer review contact. Our team at Nibib will be leading the review. And we are happy to answer any questions that ones might have. We have the chat, we have the question and answer section, and I believe we'll be answering questions. So that's a great question. The letter of intent can be sent directly to the scientific contact. Yes, the letter of intent can be sent directly to the scientific contact. The scientific contact will then, and you can also send it, CC myself on that as well. But either way, it will get back to Nibib. All of the applications will be routed to Nibib initially. But yes, you can send the letter of intent to the scientific contact or myself. All right, any additional questions? So I see we have an attendee with a question. Okay, can an application add cores in addition to the required ones? I'm gonna let Manana, would you be able to answer that question? Can an application add cores in addition to the required ones? My initial response is no, but I want to make sure that I give the correct response.
Tiffany, your answer is correct. So it's up to the program directors and up to they have whatever you are allowed is in the FOA. So it's up to you.
And so that makes sense. I shared the screen that talked about the multi-components and it listed the different cores in the overview. So we want to keep within those cores. Let's see, have any non-academic organizations received awards in the past? Yes, they have. Let's see, another one. We have a generally useful slide-free microscopy method to generate histology diagnostic useful info in minutes directly from unsectioned tissue specimens. Would like to see if anyone listening might find this useful and we could join the effort. All right, thank you so much, Richard. That was read, so hey, someone may be interested. Let's see here. We have a question. Can you explain a little bit more about the relationship between the CTSC and the Trdcs? What resources, expertise can the Trdcs count on from the CTSC, particularly in the context of this proposal? So I'm glad that you asked that, Dr. Erickson. So this will be the first year that we have a formal, well, we've had it in the past, a coordinating center, but now for this issuance of the Trdcs and POCTRN in general, we decided to make sure that the Trdcs, what you would be applying for, could focus on the technical aspects of the center. So the Trdcs would fully focus, on the technical piece. So to do that, we have outsourced the coordinating center to basically support the operative aspects of the network. They would support. They have a platform where the solicitations would be housed. You would be responsible for example, for the solicitations. You would be responsible for coming up with the topics. You've done your needs assessment. You have a topic of what that solicitation will be. The coordinating center will help you facilitate the administrative piece. You would simply provide what the topic is. You would provide who your reviewers would be. They can assist with that if there's help needed there. So it's more the administrative pieces of the solicitation. The CTSC a coordinating center will do information sharing and interaction among the Trdcs. They convene meetings, network meetings. They also help with standardized workflow. So they help equalize across the, not equalize, but support the Trdcs where things are needed. And happy to answer more questions if you have more questions about that. Can an award cover clinical trials? Can the award cover the clinical trials? I'm going to ask my colleague, maybe Erin or Julie, to speak on that.
Hi, this is Erin Ichiriaga from Nhlbi. Because we are seeking later stage technology for validation of the technology, often we don't really call them clinical trials per se, but clinical studies are allowed. If you truly have a clinical trial, it has to be done within the funds allowed and also the time frame, which is usually a little more difficult. But clinical studies have been funded through the POCTRN. Joey, any other comments?
Right, I just want to say that for this PAR, it is clinical trials optional. So trials are allowed policy-wise, it is allowed under this PAR, but individual centers may have different requirements. And as Erin mentioned, because there are limited funds, limited time, so it will probably kind of not be a really large study, and we'll look carefully when the projects come in to really determine whether it's a clinical trial or not.
All right, thank you so much. We also have another question. What technology readiness level range is suitable for this funding announcement? So we're actually looking for later stage technologies. So, you know, be mid-range to late range, it could include studies to physically validate any analytical predictions. It could be technologies that, kind of have their components and are integrated to establish that, the technologies will work together. The technologies could possibly be simulated in in an environment appropriate for the technology, areas like that. But if you have specific questions, I would say that you should reach out to your program officer contact. So what was the ratio of renewed current POCTRN centers to brand new centers in the last cycle? What ratio would you target this cycle? So that's a tough question. And the reason why I say that is because I would have to go back to see the ratio of the, the new centers. But it varies because there's interest from different ICs each time we have a funding opportunity announcement. For example, we're welcoming the National Institute of Drug Abuse this year, as well as the National Cancer Institute. So we do have areas that, that are new. So I can't, you can say a certain number, but we have totally new centers that are brought on board this time. And each time we put the funding opportunity announcement out. Is the funding requested by an applicant for the applicant institution or a specific center? Well, you're requesting funding to support the center that the applicant is putting forward. I hope I answered that. For you, but you as the applicant are putting in your application to develop a center, and the center, you're putting the budget for that particular center. Okay, so to be clear, the Trdc is responsible for the solicitation topic and review of the sub-projects, correct? Yes, the Trdc is responsible for the topic. They're responsible for supplying reviewers for that topic. And for the review of the sub-projects, they will be doing the selection of who, or the recommendation or the selection of the sub-projects, yes. How is CTSC's role different from the admin core? That's a great question. So the coordinating center, well, the admin core is, housing administration for your center in particular. The coordinating center's role is more across the different centers in the network. So to kind of streamline activities across the network. So I hope that makes sense. Your administrative core is internal to your center, and the CTSC helps streamline activities across the different centers. The admin core will work closely with CTSC to achieve the goals as well. Okay. Can a TRDC be supported by more than one institute? Absolutely. We've had that happen multiple times with multiple institutes, so yes. The centers that are funded through the U54 funding mechanism, do those centers generally already exist prior to the award? Are those centers founded, developed in response to successful applications? I would say they are centers founded, developed in response to successful applications. We have had success stories, and a success story in which one of our centers went off and was able to establish a brick and mortar center at their respective institution. So that certainly was a success. Is there a specific expectation for commercialization plan? Is there any commercialization support provided to the awardees? Well, we're very excited about that piece. Working with the coordinating center, there will be support for commercialization to the awardees. And so that will be, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but I do ask that you take a look at, it's an initiative that we've had with COVID called Readiness Tech. And we've provided different cores for technologies. So we're excited to try and incorporate some of the lessons learned and activities that we did through Readiness Tech, which included a coordinating center. It had a validation core, commercialization, and all those key things made available for technology. So we're looking at that as well. So NLM had a focus program called on personal health libraries. Point of care mobile technologies based on EHR is our focus for self-management in low income and low resource settings. Do you think such technology-based efforts will be relevant for this call? I can see a multi-IC connection. Definitely. I think that the development of those technologies, especially in low income and low resource settings, it seemed to be of interest for multiple ICs, their statements of interest, so it is of interest. Can a person propose his or her project to NIH to get funded? Yes, we do have solicitations. NIH certainly is open to projects for funding. Is any sort of FDA compliance required to obtain a grant for a biomed device to further develop and validate the device? Thanks. Is any sort of FDA compliance required to obtain a grant for a biomed device to further develop and validate the devices? I'm having a hard time following that question. But if it's in reference to the TRDCs and POCTRN, we are excited because we do have collaboration with our sister agency, FDA, in supporting FDA compliance. So that is something that the coordinating center also has access to support our technologies moving forward through the FDA compliance.
One clarification, Tiffany, and they don't need to have the FDA approval or the compliance when they are submitting the application?
No.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I may have misinterpreted that question.
Also, it just depends. This is Pushpa. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're taking something in clinical trials, or then maybe an IND or AID might be required to do that. But no FDA clearance is needed to write a grant or apply for the project, for this PAR.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so let's see here. To clarify, we shouldn't count on the CTSC to be able to provide some supplemental expertise that might be commonly needed across the network. Yes, actually, you can count on the coordinating center to do that. They are there to support and to provide a resource for the centers. So for instance, say you have a solicitation, out, you're looking for sub-projects in a certain area. Okay, so the applications come in and you notice you want to have some type of component that deals with, I don't know, commercialization or manufacturing. Is this a viable technology? The coordinating center will be able to supply or to recommend additional expertise if you need it. So that is something that the coordinating center can help with. As another way, were centers listed in prior awards slide already in existence prior to their funding through prior issuances of this FOA, or did those centers come into existence as a result of those awards? The centers listed in the prior award slide, some of them did have, were renewals from the previous funding opportunity. So yes, that was the case in some. However, majority were not. Let's see here. Will Cpap monitoring alarming devices be considered for sleep apnea? I'll turn that to Nhlbi.
I think so. That does fall under our mission area.
Okay. Is there a total number of centers that NIH and the individual institutions seek to fund for this? No, we don't have a total number of centers, but we have listed the interest of the different ICs. You know, we do have the capability of funding full centers as an IC or partial centers. So we don't have a total number that we would support. We're just looking for meritorious applications. Okay, so should the technology core specify exact POC device in particular, or should it describe the overall theme of what the technology core will solicit if awarded? So the technology core, you would want to talk about the overall theme of what the technology core will solicit if awarded. Yes. Okay, with this funding mechanism, can you speak to the typical size of the investigative team that have been funded in the past and whether the teams have often been at a single institution or bridged across several institutions? It just varies. Some, you know, it was a single institution, others bridged across several institutions. But what I can suggest is to, I hope you all are familiar with Nih Reporter. You're able to go into Nih Reporter and to view the information that's publicly available about any of the centers that we've supported in the past. So you can kind of see their institution or their affiliations and information about the topics of what was funded in the past. Let's see here. Would skincare technologies be eligible for funding under Nibib? Let's see, it's moving here. Let's see. For example, yes, so Nibib is again disease agnostic, and we you know, certainly would consider skincare as well. A technology going for FDA approval, would that be an appropriate, would that be an appropriate stage? Well, what we're trying to do is move technologies along the technology pipeline. So if you do have a technology that's going for FDA approval, there may be other areas that the center could assist with. Again, I mentioned that we will have resources and commercialization, you know, manufacturing, and we do have affiliations with the FDA. So would be an appropriate stage. We're moving from mid to late stage technologies. All right, could you elaborate exemplary a little more on past projects that were funded? Are there information online on past projects that were funded? Yes, so I do suggest that you visit Nih Reporter to see the different centers that were funded. We also have POCTRN.org, where you can see some of the information about the current centers, what they've supported, and things that they've done that may be helpful as well. Let's see here. FSDA trials would eventually be needed to validate and market the devices. Thanks for the clarification, okay? To what extent can subcontractors be used? Is there additional limitation for foreign subcontractors? I'm going to see if my colleague in grants management may be able to answer that. To what extent can subcontractors be used? Is there any additional limitation for foreign subcontractors? Rudy, would you be able to answer that question?
Sure. I don't know if there's a limitation in the announcement, but just speaking generally, I haven't seen any limitations for subcontractors. I really would like to look at the announcement again. Sorry, I'm standing in for Angelos, who's the specialist for this announcement. So, I could look into that. If someone wants to send me an email, I could double check about that, but I don't think there is a limitation.
Thanks so much, Rudy. And so, like Rudy said, listed, we have Angelos Bacchus, who's listed as for grants management, and his email contact is there. You're more than welcome to ask that question there. So how many TRDCs are expected to be funded? Again, we don't have a number. We do have maybe 7 participating ICs, and we don't have limits to the number of centers. So, you know, it's the meritorious applications, you know, and again, they're different areas of specific interest. So that's what we're looking for, meritorious applications in specific areas of interest. Does the NIH have a pre-application pitch process like the one in place for NSF, or does one have to submit the entire application? Also, what is the approximate ratio between the number of applications and the numbers funded? So starting with the pre-application pitch process, you know, or does one have to submit the entire application? The way that we work, we are very, you can talk with the program officers. I would suggest that you talk with the program officer about what you're doing. I mean, maybe that's a pre-application pitch, but it's just to the program officer to see if that actually, you know, where your particular application, you know, if it's of interest in this, according to the statement of interest, and can help with, you know, different areas with grants management, things like that. But I would suggest certainly speaking to the program officers or officers about your application before you submit the entire application. The ratio between the number of applications submitted and the number funded, I don't have that information readily available. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I don't know that answer. I don't know. Manana, would you happen to remember? Remember, this was 5 years ago. So, you know, trying to remember how many applications versus ones that were funded.
Tiffany, no, I don't remember, but we usually do not disclose this information.
Okay, all right. So we'll move on to the next question. There are 4 components that are required, up to 42 pages total. Is there any specific information of the components or further information about the component format? It sounds that technology core component may be the R01 format. Am I understanding that correctly? Format for the components. Well, it actually spells out everything in the funding opportunity announcement. Yes, there are 4 core components. It lists the number of pages, and it actually goes through the details about what needs to be included in each one of those cores. The technology core is, a key core that, expresses your knowledge, about the technical capabilities and expertise of your particular center. So that is a very important core to pay attention to. But, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact either your grants management specialist or your program officer. Is there a specific use environment that is prioritized? For example, doctor's office or home care? How much of a priority is a LMIC platform if it is not particularly of importance for USA region, malaria or dengue, for example? There is not a specific use environment that is prioritized, but I would take a look at the statements of interest for the different ICs. Some may indicate that they're looking for low and middle income countries or low resource settings. Others may not. There is not the environment for the doctor's home office or home care. I would again look at the statements of interest. And particularly important. So yeah, I think I would take a look at the statements of interest for all the different ICs to kind of gauge, where the areas of interest are. Will the next POCTRN forward be after 5 years? We really don't know. We really don't know as far as when the future of different funding opportunities are. But you certainly can, keep watch on the POCTRN website or any other methods for determining if funding opportunities are released. Let's see here. So are there any more questions? I'm going to look at the question and answer, the chat. We'll wait a few more minutes and see if anyone else has any questions. I see a hand up, but we're working through the question and answers and through the chat room. Okay, we have a question about when are awards expected to be released? Well, the awards, you see let me see if I can go to the date slide. Yeah, so the applications are due in September. So then you have to take into account, we have the AIDS applications and we also have the review process. So we would be, and it has to go through approval for the, through councils. So awards would be expected to be released probably around somewhere in the summertime of next year. When will be announcements of approval? Announcements of approval. Maybe you're asking if the application, was successful. So that would be after the, you would be contacted by grants management if your application was approved. So I would look to that sometime next year. All right, we have another question. Can you elaborate on the difference between an SBIR funding mechanism versus the mechanism for this FOA, which is a cooperative agreement? If a small business has a novel technology that would potentially be of interest to one of the NIH centers, but is not already a coordinating center for point of care technologies, does it make sense of that small business to apply to this FOA? So this particular FOA is to develop technology development centers. So with this FOA, NIH is providing funding to the center. The center is then doing its own solicitation with the help of, you know, the network, the NIH, and providing funds to the community in their specific area with their specific topic. So it's much more than a SBIR, being that it's, you know, a complex center versus a single award for SBIR. Hopefully that answers the question. Is a clinical intervention is required for a proposal? I'm not quite sure what's meant by clinical intervention. A clinical need, yes, because we believe the clinical need is what drives the technology development. So it has to have some type of clinical need expressed as, you know, a topic for your particular TRDC. Okay. Do some institutes have more funding available to award than others? So, you know, all centers are, the ones who are supportive of this particular initiative have funding available. It varies different funding levels for some, but what is probably best to kind of focus on is what your specific area of interest is, and finding one of the interested ICs to be able to relate with that particular center that you're proposing. Can you summarize in 3 sentences the major points of the award? That's a good question. Let's see here. I will pull that from one of the earlier slides that that I put forth earlier. And it kind of just talks about the TRDC in general. One thing that I just mentioned is that I can't stress enough having the importance of understanding what your specific area of what you want your center to be. And if you have questions about that, to reach out to your point of contact for the center for the IC to determine if, you know, to kind of talk through what you're proposing would be the best idea before submitting a full application. Because actually that's what the program officers are here for, and that's to help. So, so that's important, understanding what the topic is of your center and speaking with the program officers. Another one would be to understand that the NIH, again, is supporting the center, and the center is expected to be an expert in whatever that area of interest that you all will be proposing, and will be doing solicitations. You get those solicitations from doing needs assessment. What is the need in the community that you're proposing? Another point of interest is this go round, you will have support in the form of a coordinating center and additional resources to help move the technologies along the technology development pipeline. Okay, supported. Okay, thanks. How should a center determine the amount of funding to request, given that funds will be distributed ultimately to secondary projects that may or may not yet be in flight? For example, if a center wanted to fund projects related to non-invasive biomarker monitoring, the amount of funding would be highly dependent on the number of organizations that the center will ultimately fund, which may be unknown at the time of the application. Well, you know, it's hard to say because each area of interest may have their own goals for their particular center. So it may be, you know, we're supporting some in-house technologies for the application, you know, for that make up the budget, and also have a percentage that would go towards the extra sub projects. So it's almost like you know, you have to kind of balance out what you feel you can do as far as the funding is concerned with regards to those secondary projects and resources that you want to provide to the community. Okay, is RADx still in operation? Can one apply to that program for a grant? So yes, RADx is still in operation. Right now it's with regards to COVID-19. You will have to check on the RADx website for the different solicitations for that particular program. Okay, can you elaborate on community? Well, you know, we consider the network a community, and we consider the centers to be supporting their scientific community. Let's see here. Does this FOA support projects through R21, R03, and R01? So what we have seen in the past, the initiative actually supports a center, which is a U mechanism, a cooperative agreement. And so again, we support the centers support sub-projects. What we've seen is, in some cases, some of the sub-projects have been able to go on because of the funding that was supported through the center to move on and apply for R21s and R03s and R01. That seed money was what they needed, or resources or what they needed to apply for an NIH grant. So it supports it kind of indirectly. All right, well, it looks like there are no more questions. We've answered 53 of them, but moving forward again, if you look in the POCTRN announcement in the RFA, you'll see a list of contacts. Myself is on, you know, my name's on there, and happy to answer any questions that you may have, along with my colleagues from the different ICs. We're excited about this in this round of POCTRN. We see a lot of innovation brewing, and are excited about the different areas that you guys have that are of interest, and welcome anyone. We welcome contact to learn more about the application process, and I look forward to seeing many applications from you all. I will close this webinar. Thank you, everyone.